https://youtube.be/0vba Hertz JT5 Ti SI =LJ 4NEC-LQ9Z18. Anyone I knew. I threw myself into work from morning to night, hoping that if I tried long enough, if I worked hard enough, life would automatically open a better door. But strangely, the harder I tried, the more I felt like I was just running in circles around my own life, like a carriage horse going around a pole, thinking it was moving forward. One afternoon, after a long day, knocking on doors, selling a product no one wanted to buy, I put my briefcase on the floor and sat silently. A question echoed in my mind, one you've probably heard inside yourself, too. Why am I doing so much yet? Nothing is getting better. That evening, I met the mentor who changed my life. He looked at me and spoke in a deep, slow voice, sharp like a blade, slicing through illusion. Jim, the problem is not your effort. The problem is the philosophy guiding that effort. In res. I didn't understand right away, but then he explained, some people do little yet go far. Some do a lot yet stay stuck. Some walk slowly but reach the destination. Some run until they collapse yet remain at the starting point. And the difference isn't in strength, it's in direction. I started looking back on my life and realized a bitter truth. I had never stopped to ask myself what I believed in, what philosophy guided me, whose thinking system I was living under. I simply acted without knowing where my actions were taking me. Philosophy is like a sailor's compass. Without it, no matter how strong the ship is, it will drift. No matter how favorable the wind is, it's meaningless. No matter how calm the sea is, it can't guarantee arrival. But with the right compass, even in rough waves, the sailor finds his way. I realize that philosophy determines whether you spend or invest, whether you react or choose, whether you blame circumstances or change yourself, whether you live drained or live with purpose. And then I started changing little by little. I read differently. I thought differently. I wrote my goals differently. I no longer saw the world as something imposed on me, but as a reflection of my own thinking. When my philosophy changed, my income changed. When my philosophy changed, my relationships changed. When my philosophy changed, my future changed. Not because the world became better, but because I became better. I want to ask you this and answer honestly within yourself. What philosophy are you living by? Do you know it? Did you choose it? Or did you just inherit it from people who are stuck just like you? Remember, life doesn't reward blind effort. Life rewards guided effort. And if you've ever felt you deserve a bigger life, then here is the first step. Change the philosophy guiding your life. Because when philosophy changes, life can no longer keep you where you are. And then, as my mentor said to me that night, when you become the person worthy of what you desire will come to you, the priest says. Now to go deeper, I want to tell you the next truth, a truth most people avoid. Principle 2, you must become the person worthy of the success you want. There were years when I longed for a bigger life, but lived like a smaller person. I wanted financial freedom, but my mindset was still one of waiting. I wanted big opportunities, but I worked like someone who only wanted safety. And then one day, a truth hit me like a sudden winter chill. I wanted more, but I wasn't the kind of person who could keep it. I remember once early in my journey of changing my life. I told my mentor I wanted to earn more money. He looked at me for a long time, then asked a question I couldn't answer immediately. Jim, if you had more money right now, would you have the wisdom, discipline, and character to keep it? I was silent. And in that silence, I understood that success doesn't arrive to fill the emptiness of the old self. Success only arrives when the new self is formed. I have met people who won the lottery and lost everything shortly after, not because they were unlucky, but because they had not become the kind of person who could keep what they received. I've also met people who started with very little yet built brilliant careers because every time their success grew, they grew too. In the 60 seconds I spoke with many entrepreneurs far more successful than I was, I noticed something. They didn't talk about luck. They didn't talk about circumstances. They didn't talk about favoritism. They talked about mindset, habits, discipline, standards, and inner growth. I realize success isn't a reward. It's a reflection of who you become. Imagine a small container. No matter how much you pour in, It can only hold that much. If you want to hold more, you don't pour more water. You need a bigger container. Humans are the same. You can't hold a big life with a small mindset. I want to ask you, and let this question stay with you tonight. Are you expecting something bigger while living as someone smaller? You want freedom, but are you acting like someone free? You want respect, but are you living like someone worthy of respect? You want opportunities, but are you growing enough to recognize them when they appear? One of the moments that changed me the most was when I understood success doesn't chase anyone. It only appears before the person who becomes worthy of it. And the great thing is you don't need to change everything at once. I started with small things. I read every day. I wrote down my thoughts. I observed how I reacted to difficulties. I raised even my smallest standards a little bit. And like spring arriving after winter, interchange slowly bloomed. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. I once thought a good life came from the right opportunity. But now I know a good life comes from the right person first. And when you become worthy, the world responds as if it has been waiting for you. Now I want to lead you to the next truth, the truth that wakes many people up. Principle 3. The profits of mindset far exceed the wages of labor. For a long time, I believed that just working harder would help me improve. I thought if I put in a few extra hours each day, if I pushed myself more, if I endured a little longer, life would reward me with something better. But then I discovered something that chilled me. Wages pay you for what you do, but profits come to you based on who you become. I remember the time I worked on a farm and then went door to door selling. I didn't miss a single day of work, even worked more than the people around me. But at the end of the month, the money in my pocket was still embarrassingly small. One day, I complained to my mentor that I worked too much and was still too poor. He simply asked me a very light question that hit me like the weight of my whole life. Jim, are you paid because you work or because you create value? I couldn't answer 'cause deep down I knew I was working hard, but I wasn't creating more value than anyone else. I was merely trading time for money, and time is always limited. My mentor told me there are two paths in life. One is living on wages where you're always limited by your hours, your strength, and your position. The other is living on profits where you expand your value, your mindset, and your vision, and your income expands with them. I began observing successful people of that time, entrepreneurs, thinkers, people who built careers through intellect. I noticed they didn't work harder than I did, but they thought differently than I did. They saw opportunity where others saw difficulty. They saw value where others saw work. They planted ideas, and ideas produced profits. One evening, as I sat alone with an old notebook, I realized I wasn't poor because I lacked time, but because I lacked the mindset to turn time into value. I had been living like a laborer in my own life instead of becoming its architect. Imagine someone digging with their bare hands. The more they dig, the more exhausted they become. The more exhausted, the slower they work. But another person uses a shovel, then another uses a machine. Tools change results. But mindset is what creates tools. I want to ask you this, and don't answer with your mouth. Answer with the honesty of your heart. Are you being paid for hours or for value? Are you trading effort or multiplying thinking? Are you living by limits or by expansion? Because here is the truth that took me years to understand. Wages help you survive. Profits help you become free. And profits don't begin in the market, they begin in the mind. When I changed my mindset, I began seeing opportunity. Where before I saw only work, I began understanding that value isn't in what I do with my hands, but in what I build with my mind. And then something strange happened. My income increased not because I did more, but because I became someone who brought greater value. I want to leave you with a sentence you can write down, stick on your wall, or keep in your wallet as a daily reminder. Don't ask when your income will increase. Ask how far your mindset will expand. And when that happens, income becomes a natural consequence, like harvest season after the right kind of planting. Now that you understand the difference between wages and the profits of mindset, it's time to step into an even deeper truth, one that very few people dare to face. Principle 4. In danger, there is always opportunity if the mind is wide enough to see it. There were moments in my life when I thought I was hitting a complete dead end. Work wasn't going well. Income wasn't enough to live on. The door in front of me was shut, and it felt like the whole world was against me. I believed I was unlucky, that life was unfair, that everything was too hard. But then, many years later, looking back at those seemingly darkest moments, I realized something that gave me goosebumps. Every time I thought I was failing, life was actually opening a new path that I wasn't clear-headed enough to see. I once heard my mentor say a sentence that I didn't fully understand at the time. In danger, there is opportunity, but only those whose minds are open enough can see the opportunity hidden in the shell of difficulty. When I lost my first job, I thought it was the end. I was anxious, stressed, ashamed, and confused. But being pushed out of that familiar place was exactly what led me into the path of learning, self-development, and eventually to the opportunity that changed my life. If I had kept that old job, I might have lived a safe life, but a small one. I met many people in the 70s and 80s, people who had gone through crises, breakdowns, losses, and failures. And I noticed the difference wasn't in their circumstances, but in how they saw those circumstances. The weak saw an ending. The strong saw a beginning. The fearful saw risk. The mature saw choices. Those who live by emotion saw obstacles. Those who live by philosophy saw the seeds of opportunity lying in the soil. Imagine winter. Trees are bare. The ground is cold. The wind is biting. Everything seems dead. But a true farmer knows winter is not the end. It is a quiet season of preparation. Without winter, there is no spring. Without stillness, there is no blossoming. Without challenge, there is no growth. I want to ask you this and let it echo within you. What are you seeing in your current difficulties? Do you see a wall or a door? Do you see an ending or a restart? Do you see loss or space for something new to enter? Because here is the truth I learned through sweat, tears, and years of feeling lost. What you call danger is sometimes the very gift life sends to force you to grow up. Challenges don't come to crush you. They come to prove you're ready to step up to a higher level. No muscle becomes strong without weight. No faith becomes deep without being shaken. No person becomes mature without walking through the land of confusion and uncertainty. I once watched a friend lose his entire investment in one big mistake. He collapsed, shut down, and withdrew from life. But a few years later, I met him again, stronger, wiser, and far more successful. He said to me, "The worst thing that ever happened turned out to be the best thing that made me change." End quote. So, I want you to write this somewhere as close to you as possible where you can see it when you're tired, doubtful, or discouraged. Not everything bad is a full stop. Sometimes it's just an open bracket. And when you can see opportunity in adversity, you become the kind of person life cannot defeat. Now that your mind is opened enough to see opportunity and challenge, it's time to step into a truth that lifts you one level higher. A truth that determines the direction of your entire life. Principle 5. The winds of life don't decide, the sail does. For a long time, I believed my life would change when the world changed. I thought that if the economy improved, if the market became more favorable, if the times grew kinder, then I'd have a chance to go further. I waited for favorable winds. I waited for beautiful conditions. I waited for perfect circumstances. But then life taught me a lesson I will never forget. The wind blows everywhere, yet not every ship reaches the shore. I once sat with a group of young people in the 60 seconds. All of us starting from similar places. We lived in the same economy, faced the same cost of living, and endured the same turbulence of the times. But after a few years, some became well off, some moved slowly but steadily, and some stayed exactly where they were. That confused me. If we all faced the same winds, why were the results so different? Then my mentor said something that lit everything up. The wind is the same, but the sails are different. I began to understand that some people blame the north wind, some blame the south wind, some fear strong winds, and some complain about weak winds. But a true sailor doesn't wait for the wind to change. He adjusts the sail. I realized I had been living like a drifting boat. I let my emotions decide my direction. I let the news decide my hope. I let others decide my beliefs. I let the world control my fate. While the wheel had never really left my hands, I just hadn't learned how to hold it. Once during a tough economic period, many people I knew fell into despair. They said no one could succeed when the wind was against them. But I saw others people who used that time to learn, to prepare, to sharpen themselves. And when the wind shifted, they were more ready than anyone else. That's when I understood that headwinds are not the enemy. They are the test that reveals who is strong enough to go far. Imagine you're standing on the deck of a ship, wind slapping your face, waves rising high, and the sky turning gray. The weak curl up and wait for the storm to pass. The strong take a deep breath, grip the wheel, and adjust the sail in whatever way will move the ship forward slowly perhaps, but forward. I want to ask you this and let it ring inside you like a wake-up bell. Are you living by the wind or by the wheel? Do you react or do you choose? Are you being pushed or are you navigating? Are you waiting for life to change or are you changing yourself to move on? Because here is a truth that only truly mature people are willing to admit. You cannot control the wind, but you can always control the sail. And when you understand that, you will no longer fear life's turbulence. Strong winds, you learn to adjust. Weak winds, you learn to persevere. Winds change direction. You learn to be flexible. And one day, you realize that what determines your life has never been outside of you. I remember the first time I changed the sail of my thinking. It wasn't that the world became better. I became better. Wasn't that circumstances softened, I grew stronger. It wasn't that opportunities arrived. I finally saw that opportunities had always been there. I want to leave you with a sentence you can carry for life. Don't ask which way the wind is blowing. Ask which way your sail is set. His pudding says, and when you become the one who steers the sail instead of the one blown by the wind, you step into an even deeper level of awareness, the level of someone who understands that. Principle 6, Siao, tend, be patient, then harvest. There was a time in my life when I believed that as soon as I planted a seed, I should see a tree the next day. I thought that simply starting something meant the results would automatically come. But then life brought me to a lesson every farmer knows. I had just never lived slowly enough to understand it. There is no harvest for the person who won't patiently tend during the planting season. I remember clearly the early days when I started my journey of self-change. I read a book, attended a talk, heard a piece of advice, and I expected my life to change immediately. But when I didn't see results, I got discouraged. I doubted. I wondered if something was wrong with me. One day, my mentor took me to a field and said, "Jim, if a farmer plants seeds in the morning and comes back in the afternoon to check whether the grain has appeared, he'll think the whole world is against him." I stood silently 'cause that was exactly how I was living. Wanting to harvest before I had tended, wanting results before I had grown, wanting spring while I had not yet gone through winter. I remembered the 50 seconds and 60 seconds. When I spoke with real farmers, people who knew how to read the soil, the weather, and the cycles of nature. They weren't in a hurry. They weren't impatient. They understood that every seed has its own timing, its own season, its own rhythm. They sowed with faith, tended with patience, and harvested with gratitude. I realized human life is the same. Some people want wisdom, but they don't read daily. Some people want health, but they don't change small habits. Some people want financial freedom, but they don't learn to manage every dollar. Some people want respect, but they don't live like someone worthy of respect. They're not wrong. They're just missing the tending season. I want to ask you this, and let this question stay with you longer than a single breath. Are you in the sowing, tending, or harvesting season of your life? Are you giving up right before the sprout breaks through the ground? Are you blaming the soil while the seed is still under the dark surface, quietly preparing to emerge? Because here is the truth I learned, not through brilliance, but through persistence. Not all progress is immediately visible, but all progress begins from within. I've seen people quit just a little before the results arrived. They thought nothing was changing when in fact everything was changing. It just wasn't ready to show yet. Like winter keeping the seed asleep so that spring can awaken it with greater strength. I want you to picture this. You stand in front of a silent field. Nothing moves. Nothing blooms. Nothing seems to encourage you. But beneath the surface, the most important things are happening. Roots are spreading. Life is gathering. Structures are forming. And then one day you suddenly see a tiny green sprout pushing up. A reminder that patience is never wasted. Remember this sentence like a rope pulling you back every time you want to give up. Sowing needs faith. Tending needs discipline. Patience needs heart. And harvesting needs timing. And when you live by the law of seasons, you will no longer envy someone else's harvest. You'll know they also went through a sowing season. You just weren't there to see it. Now that you understand the cycle of sowing, tending, being patient, harvesting, it's time to move into a principle that will determine the speed of your growth. Principle 7. Your environment and the people you walk with shape your future. When I was young, I believed that with strong enough will, I could go anywhere I wanted on my own. I thought success was purely personal, that as long as I worked hard, stayed disciplined, and stayed determined, I'd reach the peak I imagined. But for a long time, I stayed stuck in place. Even though I was trying harder than ever, I didn't understand why until my mentor said something like a bolt of lightning cracking the wall I'd built in my mind. No one climbs to the top of the mountain alone, and no one falls into the abyss without someone standing next to them. I started looking at the people around me at the time. They weren't bad. They weren't evil. They weren't sabotaging me, but they thought small, dreamed small, and lived small. They told me not to expect too much. They told me to be satisfied with what I had. They told me life only goes so far. And I didn't realize that every one of those words was like a stone tied to my feet as I tried to climb. Once in the 70 seconds, I visited a farm with 2 planting areas. The same seedlings were used in both, but one area was inside a greenhouse where the light was right, the temperature stable, the humidity suitable. The other area was on dry soil, beaten by wind and scorched by sun. Same seeds, same farmer, same time. But the results were so different it was unbelievable. That's when the farmer turned to me and said, "Not every seed is weak. Sometimes the soil just isn't enough to let it grow." We had been. That sentence froze me in place. I looked back at my life and realized I didn't lack potential. I lacked an environment where it could bloom. I didn't lack dreams. I lacked people who believed in those dreams. I didn't lack ambition. I was just close to people who had stopped wanting more long ago. I want to ask you this and answer with the courage of your soul. Are you in an environment that nourishes or an environment that withers your dreams? Do the people around you help you grow or make you shrink? Do you hear more words of encouragement or words of doubt? Are you reminded that you can or that you should stop trying? Because this is a truth so powerful it can redirect your entire life. You will become a version similar to the people you spend the most time with. I once watched a young man who was bright and full of energy. But he lived in an environment of pessimistic, fearful people who despised change. Just a few years later, he became a smaller copy of them. Not because he was weak, but because he was in the wrong place. I also saw another man who started out very ordinary, even less fortunate, but he changed his environment. He spent time with people who were rising, learn from those further ahead. And step by step, quietly, he outgrew even his former self. Environment doesn't just influence, it reprograms a person. Like a small candle, put it in the wind, it goes out. Put it in a quiet room, it shines. Put it in a big enough space, it can light other candles. I want you to remember this sentence as a compass for the coming years. Don't just choose goals. Choose the environment that turns you into the person who can keep those goals. Because a seed, no matter how strong, cannot sprout in dead soil. And a person, no matter how full of potential, will shrink in a small environment. Now that you understand the power of environment and companions, it's time to move into the next principle. The principle that turns dreams into tangible results. Principle 8. Micro-disciplines create macro-transformation. For a long time, I thought that to change my life, I had to do something big, powerful, and dramatic. I believed a turning point had to come from a dramatic event, a bold decision, a blazing moment. But then I discovered something. Something very few people are willing to accept because it goes against human impatience. Life doesn't change in the big moments. It changes in the small habits repeated over and over. I remember when I first started reading, I didn't read much. Just a few pages each night. And at times I thought that didn't make any difference. But then 3 months passed, 6 months passed, a year passed, and I realized I was no longer the same person. Not because I had had some sudden awakening, but because I had been dripping small drops of water onto my mind every day, And the old stone inside me began to wear away, not by force, but by quiet persistence. I met people in the 60 seconds and 70 seconds who built their careers, health, intellect, and happiness. Not through explosions, but through very small steps that never stopped. They saved a little at a time. They learned a page at a time. They practiced one skill at a time. They adjusted one habit. And over time they went so far that others called it luck simply because they hadn't seen those small steps. I want you to picture this. A single brick is nothing. But lay one brick a day and one day you stand before a house. A single drop of water is nothing. But drip it long enough on stone and one day a dent appears. One step doesn't change the journey, but walk steadily and one day you've crossed the hill others only look at from afar. When I understood that, I changed the way I approached life. I stopped asking how can I change fast and started asking what is the smallest thing I can do today and every day. You minds, I realize people don't fail because they're weak, but because they demand immediate results. They want to read one book and become wise. They want to exercise for a week and become strong. They want to change for a month and become wealthy. But the world doesn't work that way. And it's good that it doesn't because if success came quickly, it would also leave quickly. I want to ask you, answer in the clarity of your heart. What small thing can you maintain consistently? What can you commit to that isn't flashy but steady? What simple habit can you keep even when no one is watching? Because here is a truth I want you to carve into yourself. It's not bursts of effort that create transformation. It's repetition that creates transformation. When I began writing down my thoughts every night, just one page, I didn't notice the change. But then I looked into the mirror of my mind and saw a different person, clearer, calmer, more directed. Not because I had changed my whole life, but because I changed one small action and kept it long enough for it to change me. One day my mentor said to me, "Jim, discipline is the bridge between intention and accomplishment." I never forgot that sentence because everyone has intentions, but only those with discipline, even small, reach accomplishment. And when you understand the power of micro-habits, you begin to see something even deeper, something that determines whether you will stay steady on the journey or not. Principle 9. Emotional endurance matters more than talent. There was a time in my life when I believed that people more successful than me were that way because they were smarter, luckier, had a better starting point, or had advantages I didn't. I looked at those who went further and thought they had something special that I didn't. But then life taught me a lesson I could no longer deny, even though I once tried to avoid it. It's not talent that determines who goes far. It's the ability to endure emotions along the journey. I still remember my early days going door to door selling. I was rejected so many times that I felt like I had no value left. There were days I knocked on 15 doors and all 15 people said no. I went home with heavy shoulders and a painful question in my heart. Am I just not good enough? But then I met others who had also gone door to door selling in the 50 seconds and 60 seconds. They weren't better than me. They didn't speak better than me. They didn't look better than me. But they had something I didn't yet have. They could endure the feeling of rejection without losing faith in themselves. I realized there are two kinds of exhaustion. Exhaustion of the body and exhaustion of the soul. The body just needs sleep to recover, but the soul needs purpose, faith, and meaning to stand up again. I once met a young artist full of talent. He had everything: skill, creativity, passion. But every time he was criticized, he collapsed. Every small failure made him quit. And then he disappeared from his own path. Not because he lacked talent, but because he couldn't bear the feeling of being hurt. I also met another man. Not remarkable in any way. But every time he was rejected, he became stronger. Every time he was underestimated, he learned more. Every time he was challenged, he quietly moved forward. And then one day, he surpassed all those who had once been ahead of him. Not because he was more talented, but because he didn't give up. I want you to picture a storm. Some trees are big with thick trunks towering high, yet one strong gust breaks them. And some trees look slender, but their roots run deep and they stand firm. Emotional endurance is the root system of a person. I want to ask you this and let this question go deeper into you than you expect. Can you keep going even when no one believes in you? Can you get back up even when you yourself doubt you? Can you hold your faith even when results haven't shown up yet? Can you bear the loneliness of someone who is growing? Because here is a truth very few are brave enough to face. Talent helps you start. Emotional endurance helps you finish. In the 70 seconds, I observed people who stayed successful over the long run. They weren't people who felt less pain. They were simply people who didn't let pain decide their future. They weren't people without fear. They were people who didn't let fear make them stop. Once my mentor looked at me and said, "Jim, emotions are like muscles. You have to train them through challenges, otherwise they'll be weak." I never forgot that because I've seen too many people with potential who broke themselves with fear, self-doubt, oversensitivity, and emotional fatigue. Remember this sentence as a shield on the days you're shaken. It's not that I'm better. I just didn't quit. And when you become someone with emotional endurance, you step into another level of awareness where you understand that success is not about climbing alone, but about helping enough people climb with you. Principle 10. Serve enough people, success will come on its own. For a long time, I chased success as if it were a rare bird I had to run after, hunt down, and hold tight before it flew away. I thought success was about achieving more, owning more, collecting more. But then life in a very subtle way showed me a truth that was completely the opposite. Success comes to those who don't chase it, but serve enough people that it finds them. I still remember when I met a big businessman in the late 60 seconds. He had an admirable career, a happy family, and a calmness that made anyone near him feel at ease. I asked him for the secret to success, expecting a complex, lofty answer. But he simply smiled and said, "I just tried to help enough people get what they want, and as a result, I have everything I want." That answer left me silent for a long time. I looked back at my life and realized the times I felt disappointed, frustrated, and lost were exactly the times I was only thinking about myself. I thought about what I lacked, what I hadn't achieved yet, what I wanted to have. But the biggest breakthroughs in my life came when I turned to a different question. Who can I help today? I remember very clearly the first time I shared what I'd learned with a younger person who was struggling. I didn't take any money. I didn't expect anything in return. I just gave. But strangely, that very day, I felt richer than on any day I earned more income. Because I realized a person's value doesn't lie in what they keep, but in what they spread. In the 72s, I saw many wealthy people who were lonely. And I also saw many ordinary people with deep influence because they helped, supported, and guided others. I began to understand that greatness doesn't come from accumulation, but from service. I want you to picture a candle. When it lights another candle, it doesn't lose its flame. It makes the room brighter. People are the same. I want to ask you this and let it travel to the deepest part of your soul. Are you trying to gain or trying to create value? Are you asking what the world should give you or what you can give? Are you trying to be better than others or trying to help others become better? Because here is a truth that only truly mature people understand. Success is not a destination. Success is the result of serving. Once my mentor looked at me and said, "Jim, if you want a big life, help other people grow big." I never forgot that. I saw that when I helped someone change their thinking, they went on to help someone else. When I shared a lesson, it created a ripple effect across the water's surface. When I lifted someone who was struggling, I was planting a seed in a field whose harvest I could never fully measure. And then I realized, there is no wealth greater than knowing someone's life is better because you passed through it. Remember this sentence as a personal oath for someone who wants a meaningful life. Help enough people get what they want, and you won't be able to avoid success. And when you live with a spirit of service, you understand something even deeper, that no matter how strong you are, the journey cannot be only about you. Because Principle 11, no one succeeds alone, but you have to start alone. There was a time in my life when I believed that if I were lucky enough at the right time in the right circumstances, someone would see my potential, reach out, pull me up, and open the door to a better life. I hoped someone would believe in me. I hoped someone would lift me. I hoped someone would walk with me from the beginning. But then life taught me a lesson that was both lonely and liberating. No one shows up to lift you until you stand up first. I remember the nights I sat alone in a small room with my bank account nearly empty and my faith shaken. No one patted my shoulder. No one told me I would make it. No one saw value in someone struggling like me. And in that silence, I understood that the first step is always the loneliest step. When I began my personal development journey in the late 50s, I had no group, no team, no cheerleaders. Family told me I was dreaming. Friends told me I was naive. Society told me to accept reality. But I still took a step, even a small one, because deep inside a voice whispered, there has to be more to life than this. And that lonely step opened the path that led me to my mentors, my friends, and companions. Later on, I realized the world only sends you the people you need after you prove you truly want to change. Over the decades that followed, I met many people who said they would start when someone joined them. They would change when they had support. They would move forward when they had a companion. But they didn't understand that companions only appear after you begin, not before. Imagine you're standing at the base of a hill. No one climbs for you. No one steps for you. No one carries you to the top. But when you start climbing, even slowly, even out of breath, even alone, you begin to see others who are climbing too. You'll meet eyes that understand you. You'll receive nods from those who went before. Only those who are climbing can see each other. I want to ask you this, and let this question touch the deepest part of you. Are you waiting for someone to believe in you while you still don't believe in yourself? Are you waiting for someone to walk with you while you still haven't taken a step? Are you waiting for someone to clear the way while you still haven't stood up? Because here is a truth many people spend their whole life to finally realize. No one can start helping you until you start helping yourself. When I walked, even in loneliness, I began to meet people with similar desires. When I read, I met those who were also learning. When I practiced discipline, I met people who respected discipline. When I grew, I met people more mature than me, and they lifted me. But only after I showed I had stepped into the journey. Once my mentor said to me, "Jim, you have to light the first torch yourself. Then the light will attract other torches." I never forgot that. You may feel lonely when you begin, but you won't be lonely forever. You may feel lost when you change, but you won't be lost forever. You may feel misunderstood by others until you meet the right people. Remember this sentence as a promise to yourself. I don't need anyone to start with me, but I will not finish alone. End quote. Because your journey will lead you to people with the same frequency, the same will, the same faith, but only when you're brave enough to step onto the path first. And when you understand this, you're ready to enter the final principle. The principle that brings your entire journey back to the deepest essence of life. Principle 12. The true value of life is not what you own, but who you change. There was a time in my life when I thought a person's value was measured by what they earned, what they owned, and what they could point to as proof of their success. I believed a bigger bank account meant a bigger life. I thought a bigger house meant greater worth. But then life in a very subtle way took away all external measures and left me face to face with a bare question. If all your possessions disappeared tomorrow, what would you have left? I remember the first time I shared a lesson with a young person who was lost. He told me that just one sentence I said helped him change the way he saw himself. In that moment, I realized what made me feel rich wasn't the money in my pocket, but the impact I had on another person's life. In the 60 seconds and 70 seconds, I met people with great wealth, but when they left a room, no one felt inspired, uplifted, or touched. They left behind splendor, but no imprint. I also met people who didn't have many possessions, but when they walked in, the room brightened. They made others believe in something better. When they left, those who remained wanted to become a better version of themselves. I began to understand possessions are what you keep. Legacy is what you leave in others. Once I stood talking to an old man at a gathering when I was young. He wasn't famous, not rich, had no high status. But as he spoke about the people he had helped learn to read, to write, to rise from difficult lives, his eyes lit up like someone watching the sunrise for the first time. I asked him if he regretted not having as much money as others. He looked at me and said, "I don't leave wealth to the world. I leave people to the world." I have never forgotten that sentence. I want to ask you this and answer not with logic, but with the honesty of your soul. If everything you own were taken away, what would you still have to give? If you disappeared tomorrow, whose life would be different because you once existed? If your name were erased from documents, would it still be engraved on anyone's heart? Because here is the truth. Every truly mature person must eventually face The true value of life is not in what is stored, but in the lives that are lifted because of you. Picture a flame. When it touches another candle, the light spreads. It doesn't grow weaker, it multiplies. People are the same. I look back on my life, the talks, the words, the people I've touched, and I understand that what tells me I have truly lived is not my accounts, assets, or titles. It's the moments when someone says to me, "Because of you, I didn't give up. Because of you, I believed in myself. Because of you, my life turned in a different direction." No car can give that feeling. No house can replace that feeling. No amount of money can buy that feeling. Remember this sentence as the crystallized conclusion of the whole journey. Don't let your life be only about you. Let your life touch the lives of others. Because success is temporary. Impact is permanent. And when you live with that awareness, you rise to the highest level of maturity. The level of a person who doesn't just live but leaves light behind. Before we close, I want you to take a truly quiet moment to realize this. If you've stayed until this very last second, it means there is a part of you that is longing to become a bigger version of yourself. Not everyone makes it this far. Not everyone is brave enough to look back at themselves. But you have done that. And that is a sign of a life that is changing direction. Today's journey is not meant to be listened to and then forgotten. It is like a seed that has just been placed into the soil, and you will decide whether it dries up or sprouts. I want to invite you to do something simple but more powerful than you think. Write down in the comments just one thing, one principle that you will start applying from today. When you write it down, you're not just speaking to me. You are speaking to yourself. You are confirming your direction. You are turning the sail. And if what I've shared has touched you, lifted you, or helped you see life through different eyes, hit like so the algorithm knows the world needs more messages like this. Subscribe if you want to continue the journey, because the next video will take you deeper into the process of becoming the kind of person who attracts success instead of chasing it. And if you truly want to anchor your spirit, turn on notifications so that every time you are about to give up, you'll hear a voice reminding you you were born to be bigger than your current life. Before I leave you for now, I want to leave you with a sentence I used to repeat to myself in the hardest years of my life. Success is not something you pursue, but something you attract by the person you become. I want to see you in the next video where your journey continues to unfold and where you no longer walk alone.